Many paranormal stories get dismissed because they lack credibility. Often, the person telling the story isn't seen as trustworthy, or there's no solid evidence to back up their claims. But today, things are a bit different. We've got Bill Vaile, a NASA robotics engineer, leading the narrative. Bill Vaile had to start believing in paranormal things after strange stuff started happening in his house. His credibility is pretty solid. Plus, he's got backup from his family and friends who also witnessed the bizarre events alongside him to add weight to their story. Please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating stories like these. Bill was always the brainy type. He was all about science and engineering stuff. He spent a good 15 years at NASA, messing around with robotics, and even taking a spin as a pilot of a submarine. People around him always said he was a straight shooter. No frills or imagination, just facts. But then in 2002, things got flipped when he split from his wife and ended up back in Arlington, Texas. Seeking a fresh start, he decided to jump into the family business, working alongside his brother in the water purification industry. One day, he went to a potential customer's house for work and heard shouting inside. Someone was yelling about Jesus Christ. He went inside to see what was happening, and he found 3 people sitting on the floor, while a woman walked around them with a book in her hands, chanting something that didn't make any sense to him. The woman just stared at Bill and then pointed at him without saying a word. He decided to leave the place quickly and never go back. He called his boss and said that the house was just too strange for him. Later, at home, as he lay in bed reading, Bill saw something small moving around. Then he felt something running over his foot while he was in bed. He checked but still found nothing. Then suddenly his bed started shaking so hard it threw him around. He panicked and thought it was an earthquake. When it stopped, he searched online for earthquakes in the area, but his internet wasn't working. He checked the windows but couldn't see anything outside. Also, nothing else in the house was disturbed. He checked under the bed, but found nothing. He tried shaking the bed himself, thinking he might have done it in his sleep, but it wouldn't move. It was too big and heavy. He tried checking the news online, but the internet was not working. So, he called customer service, but while on hold, he heard strange threatening noises on the phone. When he hung up and called back, the customer service rep confirmed hearing the weird sounds too, adding to Bill's confusion. The customer service rep and Bill were both weirded out by the strange phone call. That night, Bill tried to get some sleep, but he couldn't stop thinking about the weird events. He heard a sound under his bed, which could have been his imagination, but it did scare him. He pulled the covers over his head, trying to convince himself that nothing was there. With a little light in the room, Bill saw a hand reaching up from under the bed, trying to grab his foot. He freaked out, turned on all the lights, and checked under the bed, finding nothing. Unable to sleep, he stayed up all night with every light on. The next day, Bill tried to go about his day as usual, not wanting to think about the strange events. But he felt anxious about going back home, worried that the weird things might happen again. When he returned home, he turned on all the lights and sat in his chair, and started eating his microwave dinner and watching TV. Suddenly, a bottle came flying towards him, narrowly missing him and hitting the wall. Then, all the lights in the house went out. Panicked, Bill rushed to the closet where he knew there was a flashlight. When he opened the door, he saw a box on the shelf float up, hang in the air, and then crash back down with a bang. Shortly after, Bill faced something truly terrifying. He described it as a dark figure wearing a fedora, about 6 feet tall, which he called the Shadow Man. It seemed to float and stopped about 1.5 feet from his face. The figure stared at Bill for a few seconds before vanishing. Bill could see its features clearly, like its head, shoulders, and nose, but he felt an evil presence from it. Not knowing what else to do, Bill called his brother for help. He was too scared to go to the police because the strange events sounded too unbelievable. His brother Bob arrived, and Bill asked him to check the closet to see if he experienced anything unusual. Reluctantly, Bob agreed and entered the closet while Bill waited outside. In the closet, Bob experienced something hitting his leg and then his face. He assumed he accidentally bumped into things. However, it left him a bit unsettled. Despite this, Bob decided not to tell Bill about it because he didn't want to add to his brother's worries. When Bob came out of the closet, he assured Bill that nothing strange happened inside. Bill felt disappointed and embarrassed. He decided to confide in his friend Michael, a sound engineer who worked on podcasts. During their conversation, the strange voice from Bill's earlier call suddenly interrupted. Both Bill and Michael could only hear this eerie, threatening voice. Michael, instinctively, started recording the voice using his equipment. Later, when they played back the recording, all they heard was their own voices, no creepy voice. A few nights later, his brother Bob and sister-in-law Cindy also visited. While they were watching TV, Bill saw something dart by the room. He asked Bob to sit in his chair and look at the TV, just like he was doing. When Bob sat down and looked at the TV, he too jumped up moments later, saying he saw something run by. Cindy sat down next, and she saw the same thing. They described it as a small, hunched figure with arms and legs, about 2.5 to 3 feet tall, moving quickly. It wasn't transparent, but didn't look solid either. Bill kept seeing these things, which he called imps. Concerned for Bill's safety, Bob and Cindy invited him to stay the night at their place, but Bill refused. He didn't want to let these things take over his house, and he didn't want to show any weakness. He wasn't ready to give in to whatever was in his home. Later, Bill decided to call a paranormal team for help. They set up cameras and equipment. Initially, they found nothing unusual. Then, one of the team members entered Bill's room, and something eerie occurred. They witnessed mist forming on camera and a laser beam fell. Strange noises could also be heard. After the team left, Bill remained in his house, determined to confront whatever was happening. That night, he heard loud crashing sounds as if something were smashing into his house. However, upon investigation, he found nothing amiss. The crashing sounds then seemed to move inside his house, despite everything appearing normal. When Bill's car alarm went off, he became furious. He began shouting at whatever was causing the chaos. Suddenly, a 3-foot-wide black mass dripped from the ceiling of Bill's bedroom and hit the floor with a thud. The shadow man in the fedora appeared next to him, pacing back and forth. Bill said he often saw shadow figures, but none felt as evil as the one in the fedora. As time passed, the shadow man appeared more frequently and caused more problems for Bill. It got so bad that he stopped sleeping at night because of the things that were happening. One day he woke up with scratches on his chest and ended up in the hospital due to stress. Bill believed it was some kind of demon haunting his house, even after undergoing 2 exorcisms. Despite the terrifying experiences, Bill refused to leave because he didn't want to subject anyone else to the horrors he had endured. Bill believed that when he visited the woman's house, she was exorcising demons from the 3 men, and the demons latched onto him as they left the men's bodies. Regarding the Shadow Man and the imps, he theorized that the imps set the stage under the Shadow Man's direction. The Shadow Man appeared to escalate things, leading to the darkest experiences. While Bill felt he expelled the Shadow Man's demon as he was not scared of him, and the imps remained. He saw them as mischievous, but not evil. In Bill's view, denial and fear are demons' strongest weapons. He suggests they wear us down to gain control. While he's endured over 20 years in his haunted house, he questions if others could handle it. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Until next time, stay cautious and remain vigilant.